well as killer prezzos. So please welcome back Eric Meyer.
Uh-oh, I already passed one. Okay. Could you put that up on your site? Hey guys, Eric Myers. I've actually only been at Belo Media Group for about 90 days, so it seems a little odd speaking on this topic, so I'll keep pretty general. I've been working with Belo for more than a decade. Amongst many of the big metro publishers, we've kind of set up groups to discuss business, where we're going in the new future. We deal with the same issues, and so not unlike a room like this, maybe slightly bigger, we spend a lot of time ideating on what's the staff look like if you're going down this model of truly trying to be a digital agency like everyone in the publishing world basically says they are. Where's the expense? Do you buy? Do you partner your build? And that's what I'll set up today. Where we find that it works at Cox, I did this for about a decade, and we found kind of obviously how many things did not work, how many things did work to be truly client first. I tried to stick with a Marvel theme to keep relevant, so my designers enjoyed building the presentation, because they're all Marvel heads, as am my daughter and I. Protecting our clients and serving our audience. I say that because we talk a lot about inside politics in the publishing world, about where our expenses lie, where our revenue streams are, and it seems so simplistic, but how many times we start to fade away from actually asking the client what they want us to be as a large local publisher. And so it's a mantra that sounds simplistic, but I find it can redirect conversations quite a bit while we're talking about investments. Obviously, everyone wants to be omnichannel. If you're going to have a sales force, if you're going to have a highly compensated sales force, you need them to walk out the door and the clients to feel like they're helping them solve problems, not selling your product. Again, we've been talking about that in the industry for quite some time, but I think you have to actually invest. You need to not just say it, but you need to follow through on talent. You need to buy, partner, build, and we'll talk about that. At Belo Media Group, and one of the reasons that I'm there now, is they actually have a M&A team that sits in my office fairly frequently, every couple of weeks, and asks, should we buy into this space? Should we partner with someone and build a team to support that partnership? Or should we try to build it from the ground up? Pretty cool organization. They started to purchase small digital service agencies around Texas probably about 5 or 6 years ago. As they got out of the broadcast space and as they got out of some of the smaller newspapers, they reinvested a lot of that money. I say that because a lot of publishers put that to the bottom line. Been incredibly happy with what Belo Media Group has been willing to do to take care of that ultimate client. These are kind of brands. Dallas Morning News is the oldest, this is an interesting tidbit. You've heard about the old newspaper business. Dallas Morning News is actually the oldest business in Texas, constantly running. Not from Texas. I realize what that means, and there's a pride factor to be at the oldest company in a state like Texas, which has a lot of pride. But as we all know, coming from a newspaper and trying to go deep into a new digital world over the course of the last 20 years, that can turn off at least 30% of the potential clients, as they do not want to be talking strategy with an old newspaper group. On the other hand, in Dallas, Texas, there's another third that you can walk in the door and get the business because of that history. So it's an interesting balance of how we need to go to market with our brand to make sure that we truly are delivering in this new space. Belo Media Group is just that. That's taking all of our assets and rolling it under basically for that exact reason. We all do it in the media world, try to get away from that brand name because of some of the problems with it. However, then the challenges are, what exactly are you and what is a Belo, which we deal with a lot. Belo & Company is basically the holding organization where we've put all the digital assets that had different names. Distribuon is a marketing platform, SaaS, built by one of the team members at our organization. We've actually purchased that business from him, and he is still working there. That's license-based, going to a large organization that needs to do turnkey marketing solutions, like a large financial group that has advisors all over the world. It can scale to that fairly easily. Marketing Effects, Tchotchke's print and promo organization. Vertical Nerve is one of the multiple digital service agencies that Belo Media Group has purchased. And we're trying to organize all these brands. Nobody knows what all that means. Obviously, that's our challenge. And so we spend quite a bit of time. How do we go to market? What's relevant? And unlike previous where you made one decision and went with it, we're becoming incredibly flexible based on what we think our clients want us to be. So packing our utility belt, we know that we have to be in every part of the space if we're going to be relevant. If I'm actually have a sales force that I believe is the best sales force in a marketplace, I don't want them to turn away from any business if at all possible. And that's where it gets into the margin issue. How many people do you need? Can you have an evergreen staff that can handle that? But more importantly, I think, is can you own the beginning part of the sales funnel? And so I'm pretty adamant about this, and I actually just did a discussion with a bunch of consultants a couple days ago when I first got here for 2 hours on this topic of what should we own, what should we buy, what should we get rid of type of a discussion. What do we need to be in? And I'm very bullish on getting way into strategy, creative, and getting the cash flow coming through our organization, helping our clients long before they're ready to do a media plan. And as a large media company, that can be an interesting space. Cubic Creative, little agency in Tulsa, Oklahoma, really cool, amazing team. We just purchased in April. And we're keeping it as a standalone brand. They have an incredible space in the travel tourism. They take care of a lot of economic development teams at cities across the country. So they play very heavily in that space. We don't really step on each other's toes. And then they help us on the advertising sales side have a little bit more relevant conversations earlier on in the process. Pretty cool. I can do this all day is my tip to fulfillment. So everybody has almost all of these products at all times. Differentiating yourselves in the space, as the handful of publishers that are out here today know, it's can you deliver on it? And so we have to make sure that we have world-class QA. I'm bullish about that as well, so that whether we partner or whether it's our own product sets, we have the respect of the vendor as well. I find that often large traditional media organizations such as ourselves will work with really smart partners like those in the room, and we'll make you deal with someone on my team who knows nothing about what you're talking about, and I think that's a failure as well. So making sure that we own QA and strategy, not only on our own product sets, but that we give you the right connectivity at our organization so that we can have relevant conversations and so that you feel you're giving us your best product sets or solutions. So we spend quite a bit of time working on that. At Cox, we did that, and we're deep into it at Belo Media Group right now. Obviously, not telling you anything you don't know, but I want all of my account executives to show up with, at the bare minimum, these opportunities for their clients, and because of that, we need to invest quite a bit. I use a discussion either 2 for 1 or 3 for 1. So whatever the reason is, as 2 to 3 people leave our organization, don't replace them with 2 to 3 more people, because that's just not how it works anymore from a financial standpoint. Replace them with one of the best in the business at something in particular. So we're really specializing in some cases. A lot of people at a traditional media organization, I notice they're so worried about keeping their head count at the same headcount, they tend to never get competitive. If you cannot hire someone from one of the platforms because you don't pay enough, then I don't think you're really trying to compete in the digital space at a local level. So we know what they pay. I know what the 2 big guys pay in a local marketplace. We make sure that we can pay the same or better than that, and then have the added benefit of a very cool traditional organization with great benefits, good place to live, et cetera. So that's a real conversation. It's a candid conversation we have every day, and it's done well for us. So what we look for is when a client walks through our organization, I want them to say, this is not what I expected to see. Meaning the type of people, the intelligence, the way the rooms look across the board. And we spend quite a bit of time in that space. This is one of my favorite orgs that we've invested in. It's called eSite Analytics. Everybody's into discussing data, or you're supposed to say big data quite a bit, I realize. What I like about this team is that many people can purchase data. He spends millions of dollars at the beginning of the year on data so that he has enough data to share with our clients, and he has to refresh that at least once a year, if not multiple times a month, depending on what he's looking for. But what I like about this team is it's a bunch of really, really sharp MBAs that were all out in the consulting space at big business around the world traveling, and he's brought them all into this team. So it's really about the insights that they deliver with the data that I find incredibly interesting, and I think it gives us a right to win early on in the discussion with clients, long before we're discussing purchasing advertising, buying search, managing SEO, having an intelligent content strategy for the org. But there's a why there, and we feel pretty confident in the insights he gives us. And he's got the added benefit of having some cool design. That's actually one of his maps. But he's got nice looking maps, good looking presentation, but it's really about the brain power that he's hired with that team. And they show up pretty strong. All of that being said, we can't walk away from owned and operated. And we own great page views, great content. We're incredibly relevant to a local marketplace. How many people are buying IO direct, right? Well, what's interesting about our org, I'm not going to give you exact numbers, but let's say it's $100 million in ad revenue in Dallas at our org. 2 million of that is indirect digital. 30 million of it is direct digital, and the rest is events, print, et cetera. And so we cannot live on indirect by any means, and so it's a pretty significant amount of hustle to make sure not only do we have the products, but the staff to support that. In the owned and operated space, instead of having a sales force that's still trying to sell $8 CPMs on a 300 by 250 above the fold, we really try to tie our owned and operated media into almost media events, so calendarizing the year, utilizing some of that good old journalistic practice of knowing what your editorial calendar is, and then upgrading it into what we call small J journalism that is ad-friendly and selling sponsorship against that, both on the owned and operated site, but actually investing in those events. And so we hold small events throughout the year that are tied to our digital buy. It gives us a little bit of a separation from just being able to buy us through a DSP transaction because we do not offer that level of service programmatically. So that tends to work pretty well to get the value up, but more importantly, to stay client focused. They find it to be quite important to be connected to our brand in that way. We find that we can still win in that space. I already mentioned building a decent team, and again, you really have to think, if you're going to compete in this space, you really have to be willing to invest in it, and you have to make hard decisions in other parts of the company. Again, I think that's pretty logical, but I find that a lot of publishers are not willing to make that risk and truly try to be the best in a marketplace. Redundant, the preconceptions I mentioned, when you're more than 130 years old, newspaper, you really have to get out there and market yourselves with this new team, or else the phone's not going to ring, right? And so for them to hit these large ad numbers, they have to practice. We have to bring them in. We have to show them our labs. We have to show them the data that we have so that they trust us. And so we spend a decent amount of time there. We're propping up a pretty big B2B team to make sure that we can communicate directly to the client long before we show up to talk to them, and we have found that works quite a bit. But we invest in that space as well. In the org, we've talked about it a little bit. Tobias did a talk a week ago in DC, this whole discussion about membership, which is our fancier term for subscriptions, basically. Can you have that balance of making money in that space where there's still, for many organizations, they're getting double-digit growth in membership or in subs, they're having declining ad revenues, but without walking away from advertising? How do you match this beautiful balance so that you're getting both revenue streams? And so we kind of are starting to meld it, that membership mentality means any good client that cares about our organization or any good reader that's willing to pay. Those are both our members. So we actually do events for both of them. We get them together. We give them VIP experiences through our assets, whether that's large sporting contracts and bringing them into suites, but melding this concept that members get to hang out together in a city like Dallas where that matters. Networking's pretty big there. Business is a sport, as it's often described in Dallas. And we've been able to meld that fairly well, and we're gonna try to double down on that over the course of the next year. It's fun to think that way. It's also obviously UX matters, we're all in the same room. I think it can get pretty unhealthy when the debate goes, okay, advertising's unattractive, we don't want it on our site anymore, this is all about our subscriber, and you slowly realize that that's not an evergreen model either. And so just making sure everybody's in the room, having the discussion, how's the site look, what are we making the decisions on? Is volume most important, or is time of engagement more important? And I think the answer is it's a little bit of all of it. And so we try to make sure that that balance occurs from the beginning. And that's just a build on that thought process. But we want to take care of our audience, but taking care of our audience means a very close relationship between volume so we can monetize it, advertising, and experiential so that the members are willing to pay decent subscription rates and sustainable. So big discussion in our organization. That's fairly obvious that it's a cool slide, but we talk about that a lot too. I think at a big publishing company, so much of what you talk about is so you-focused. And I just kind of have this discussion that every day is a new day in our world. And you have to have a team that is able to adapt and adopt new concepts. We really push the thought process that if you're hiring someone, that their job description needs to be about a third open. Kind of gone are the days where it's siloed organization. Everyone uses the word matrix, but I find that most organizations, especially traditional publishers, stay incredibly hierarchical. If you have somebody smart and they're good at events, they need to support events for our whole company. This is not owned by one division. This is not owned. And so we push that concept pretty hard. It sounds, again, fairly logical, easier said than done sometimes. And that's pretty much a wrap, but I had to finish off that there is no end game, and that's the same concept. Is we don't think there's a point B that it's going to be the perfect revenue stream in 2020. We're really operating that it's a hustle every day. We want to see digital revenues cover print revenues within the next 3 years, which I think we can do, and not just because print revenues fell. And so when we wake in the morning, there is a real, I call it appropriate sense of panic, not in a negative way, but in more of a hustle. So that's my wrap, and I really hope that a couple people ask me questions, because one thing I do love about this conference, I think this might be either the third or fourth time I've spoken here, is if I walk away with 1 or 2 new partners, that's a successful conference to me, or 1 or 2 more connections in the publishing world that we can ideate after it's over. So I definitely look forward to that. Thanks, man.
Eric, as always, thanks so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Guys, you got a couple of follow-ups?
Yeah.
You talked about paying market rate or going over market rate for talent.
Yep.
Is this even on? I don't do you ever worry or feel or have that boundary of when you think that you're going so far over market rate for somebody that it's awkward, or you're prepared to do it because you're so confident you want that person? Because often, hi. We have that issue. You know, someone comes along and says, "This is my price." You think they're that great, but you worry that you're either being conned or you're actually getting super talent.
Yeah, obviously that is a concern, because it's in some cases double to 2.5x what we're maybe currently paying. And so yeah, we have that debate all the time. I'm willing to take the risk, and so I'm also willing to make sure my leadership team's comfortable in, if that was a sales job, that they don't stay around too long. And you can get to that when they ask for that level of salary and comp, you can pay pretty close attention and figure that out sooner than later. And the beauty about ad revenues is they're either bringing them in or they are not. And so it's a pretty black and white when it comes to that side. On more of the QA and the strategy side, that you can usually get a pretty specific track record of the jobs that they've held and know based on accomplishments. We make sure we do pretty serious vetting. We do at least one personality test during the very beginning part of the interview process before our leadership team will meet with that person. We have about a 20 to 30 page document on the person, regardless of the level of position, and then it's benchmarked against other high performers in that space. So we have it for strategy jobs, we have it for revenue producing jobs, and then kind of traditional operational jobs, and then obviously on the content side as well. So we think we eliminate some of the risk, but you don't always eliminate the risk. So.
Who are you competing with and who are you not competing with? When you go into market, how do you make sure that
yeah,
you're
we
not
talk about that all the time.
colliding with your own clients?
Yeah, you know, and many publishers have become agencies of sort. Again, it's an overused word, kind of like saying data or digital. There's 1,000 different ways you can go to market as an agency. So in a way, we're competing against agencies for our ad revenue. But we're also partnering really well with agencies, maybe better than we ever have before. So that's an interesting relationship to manage. We're going after anyone that is looking for media, marketing, strategy, or advertising in the DMA that we're representing. And so that's against the big platforms. We're competing against direct teams. Many of the partners that we work with have direct sales organizations. And if we don't sign exclusivity agreements, we may be competing with the same company that we're sending millions of dollars to, as many publishers do. So it's against other publishers for that dollar, it's against the big platforms for that dollar, it's against the partners, and pretty much anyone nowadays that can open up an agency with a overcoat and selling watches out of the back of their trunk, or t-shirts in Freddie's case. They can all compete, really. And so you really have to, that's why owning that strategy in the QA, I think, is the point of distinction, because the product, I mean, we're all ultimately selling Google when you're selling search, or you're selling a platform. And so if you're going to be in that space, can you have the best QA and strategy team to own something and get a differentiation?
Eric, as always,
Cool.
thank you so
Thanks.
much.